Hello, my name is Professor Shirts. These are your materials for today.
Hey guys, how are you doing? Doing pretty good today, personally. I am going to make today a sculpture, but a master study, really, of a Picasso. It's actually the largest Picasso sculpture in the world. It is currently in Sweden, and I'll share some photos with you guys. Mine will be a little different. You know, I want to personalize it a little. But the main things I think it's nice to learn through this sculpture project is the idea of cubism. So Picasso and Braque, they created cubism. They did not create abstraction, but cubism is a form of abstraction. So think of it like this. Think of a cube and all its different sides. Imagine my face, the front of it is the cube. The side view is the side view of the cube. This side, the other. And what they did is they took all these sides, including time. So imagine this is the front of the cube of me. Now, maybe this is me later. So time became involved too. Think of like clips in a video, like old style film, like each cell being combined into one moment. So Picasso abstracted representation. He abstracted real things you see, and this is an example of the sculpture that he made. And when you go around it, it has much different perspectives and really seems different. So think of this as, like, you probably are familiar with some of his more famous Cubist paintings, but this sculpture, think of it as like the second step. The first step is the representational visualization of what you see in front of you, like exactly the same. The sculpture would be like one step away from that, like broken down in space. And then the Cubist painting would be a flattened version of that same thing. So here we go. I'm going to do a little drawing first to plan it out. Drawings for sculptures are a little different because you want to consider, particularly with this kind, different perspectives. So I'll do some small thumbnails from different perspectives, keeping in mind.
So begin as you would with a painting, with a thumbnail drawing. But since we're working in 30 dimensions, let's at least do 3 drawings, particularly with this cubist version of a sculpture that looks at a figure, a face, from different perspectives. I began by deciding what I wanted to keep of the master study and what I wanted to take out. I certainly wanted to keep the profile, the female profile. I wanted to change some of the pattern. I've been really into a buffalo check pattern, so instead of some of the patterning that he selects, I changed it to mine. And in my thumbnail, I leave my notes to remind myself what I was thinking for my plan. I intend to allow myself to make changes as I move along, because my goal is to learn about these materials and cubism. Those are the 2 main goals. So as long as I'm working with these materials and working from different vantage points to create the sculpture, then I'm pleased. So this is from the opposite perspective. Here we go.
Okay, so those are all the things I'm thinking about. You'll probably have different materials, but how about you come and watch the process of me thinking this through?
Think of this project as preparing you for future projects. So you'll make notes in your mind of how you may do things differently the next time. But this time, just roll with it. There's always things that go this way or that. Once you change the medium, it shifts everything and has a wider variety of variables. Each time you're planning for the next one can be easier the more that you work with these materials. Honestly, I lucked out on this toilet roll fitting. It adds a lot more stability to my watercolor paper, and then the tape can add stability as well. So you want a stable structure for your sculpture to be balanced upon. Here I'm testing out different methods of making the figurative elements more stable. As I feel the cardboard is too flimsy, I'd like it to have more structure to it. I could add tape, I could add more layers of cardboard, So I start off with a little bit of tape, and then you'll see soon what I end up deciding to do. I add a whole nother medium. I test it out by the feel of it, but also putting it back together as a full structure as I will once it's painted. I feel like the column is now structurally sound. This is my test for that. I'm looking at my thumbnail drawing and trying to decide, how do I want to cut this shape? There's parts of it that are already cut nicely. It's a nice curve to it. I'm trying to determine where the eyeball shape is located, so I can just draw some notes on the cardboard. I'll be painting over it, so that's all right. I test it out and fine-tune some elements. I can test it out by putting it all together. I will be painting the top two elements separately for their first layer. I'll actually be taking it outside and using some gesso. To improve the adhesion of the color choices you make, it could benefit you to use a white gesso or a primer for a wall primer, to cover the cardboard so that you can really see your colors pop. I am going to use some spray paint just to make it a quicker process. It's typically all one matte consistency, but a little chunkier. Won't get on everything. According to an article in masterworksfineart.com, from 1907 to 1917, Pablo Picasso pioneered the Cubism movement, a revolutionary style of modern art that Picasso formed in response to the rapidly changing modern world. In collaboration with his friend and fellow artist Georges Braque, Picasso challenged conventional, realistic forms of art through the establishment of Cubism. He wanted to develop a new way of seeing that reflected the modern age, and Cubism is how he achieved this goal. Picasso did not feel that art should copy nature. He felt no obligation to remain tied to the more traditional artistic techniques of perspective, modeling, and foreshortening, and felt two-dimensional objects. Picasso wanted to emphasize the difference between a painting and reality. Cubism involved different ways of seeing or perceiving the world around us. Picasso believed in the concept of relativity. He took into account both his observations and his memories when creating a cubist image. He felt that we do not see an object from one angle or perspective, but rather from many angles selected by sight and movement. As a result of this belief, Cubism became about how to see an object or figure rather than what the artist was looking at. Cubism was really highly influenced by African art and the modern urban street life of Paris. In addition, Picasso became fascinated with the process of construction and deconstruction, a fascination that is evident in his Cubist works. When creating these Cubist pieces, Picasso would simplify objects into geometric components and planes that may or may not add up to the whole object as it would appear in the natural world. He would distort figures and forms and simultaneously depict different points of view on one plane. Picasso actively created works of Cubist art for around 10 years. Within this time span, his Cubist style subtly evolved from analytical cubism from 1907 to 1912 to synthetic cubism from 1913 to 17. With analytical cubism, Picasso utilized a muted color palette of monochromatic browns, grays, and blacks, and chose to convey relatively unemotional subject matters, such as still lifes and landscapes. He placed an emphasis on open figuration and abstraction, but did not yet incorporate elements of texture and collage. With synthetic cubism, Picasso incorporated texture, patterning, text, and newspaper scraps into his Cubist works. While he still portrayed relatively neutral subjects such as musical instruments, bottles, glasses, pictures, newspapers, playing cards, and human faces and figures, his technique had progressed to the point where he was consistently including elements of collage, a technique that is often credited with inventing. With synthetic cubism, Picasso redefined the visual effect of his original Cubist technique and incorporated new materials, paving the way for the artistic avant-garde movement to ignite throughout Europe. Cubism is renowned as a groundbreaking artistic movement in and of its own right, yet also influenced generations of artists to follow, shaping the very history of art. While the majority of Picasso's works of Cubism are paintings, he also created stunning prints, etchings, lithographs, and linocuts in the style of Cubism. Such Cubist prints are exceedingly rare and are often created after the image of renowned Picasso Cubist paintings such as Still Life with a Bottle of Rum, 1911. Picasso also incorporated pochoir, or hand-applied watercolor, to the majority of his Cubist prints, further contributing to a sense of texture and color. As Picasso is credited with establishing and spearheading Cubism, these Cubist prints are iconic. They remain amongst his most collectible and treasured graphic works to date. Images can be seen at the end of this video. Okay, the form, the figure, the line work is coming together. I am using a more gestural, thick application of paint, but I am going through after and smoothing some areas so it has the effect that I so desire. I just keep turning and moving away from it at least 10 feet to get an overall view, and then coming back to it. After the white paint, I mix up my own black. I put a red, a green, and a little bit of blue together. You could use your primary colors to create the black of your choosing. I'll do probably 2 layers over some areas because some of the white paint is blending to make a gray. I don't mind it at some points, but other points I want it to be more of a delineated difference between the areas. So I'll even just sometimes let the paint get tacky. So tacky means that it's starting to dry on the surface, but it's still wet underneath. And as long as it's tacky, you can start to paint over and have a more crisp, matte, opaque version of whatever color, mine is black, that you would like. And now I'm turning the other way, switching the angle of my brush depending on how I want the mark making to be, using either a wrist stroke or a shoulder stroke depending on the needs. Stabilizing my hand, my elbow on the table when I need to. I'd like to keep some of this worn look that was created. Some of the spray paint over the gesso got pulled off on accident. I'd say that that's the happy accident that occurred with this project. There always seems to be one, And luckily this time it has a nice effect. I went a little overboard with the black in some areas, so I'm going to try to mix this spray paint gray, which leans in a little bit into the green, and try to blend it out so that I can cover up some of the black that I added. I'm trying to think of angles, and then of course the blue tape. Did a pretty good job mixing. We'll see how it dries. You know, acrylic paint tends to dry dark. And I'm cleaning up. It's not quite tacky in some places. I'm a little over eager. I think I was getting ready to go on vacation with my family to Palm Springs. So I just went with it. Cleaning it off in between. Ooh, that blue tape down in the column is so annoying. I wonder if I'll get that. I don't think I get it. I did this white stripe just to kind of test out how it would look, and then I did not like it at all once I turned it around like this. And then the base, I just added kind of a gray black just to kind of knock out the visual power of the blue tape. On the profile of the box, I decided to move away from the black paint and use white stripes and allow the brown of the box to show. So I only did the white over the tape. And finally, here she is, in all her glory, from different perspectives. A little wild, just how I like it. Thank you for joining me. See you next time.